Today, we're looking into a really pivotal moment in American history, specifically the hidden world of organized crime during the mid-20th century. It was a time of intense upheaval, brutal power struggles, and ultimately a complete reshaping of how these criminal organizations operated. And understanding this period, how these structures were built and why, gives you some crucial insight into how organized crime evolved and why it's had such a lasting impact. It's quite a story.
It really is. And to get why the changes were so dramatic, you first have to picture the scene in the early 1930s. You had these established powers, figures like Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano. They were the big players.
Right, the old guard, so to speak.
Exactly. And their conflict was really about who would control the Italian-American underworld, particularly in New York. Their methods were, let's say, traditional. Hierarchies, loyalty, and their money came mainly from things like gambling. Bootlegging was fading out, but still there.
So these two figures, Masseria and Maranzano, they're essentially fighting for the top spot. And this wasn't just office politics. This was war, right? What really sparked it.
Oh, absolutely. It escalated into what's known as the Castellamarese War. Ran from about 1930 to 1931. The core issue: simple dominance.
Yeah.
Who gets to run the American Mafia in New York City? On one side, you had Joe Masseria. His crew included some, well, soon-to-be very famous names: Lucky Luciano, Albert Anastasia, Vito Genovese, Frank Costello.
Yeah, heavy hitters.
Definitely. And opposing them was Salvatore Maranzano. He had guys like Joseph Bonanno, Stefano Magaddino, Joe Profaci backing him. It really boiled down to a fight over who controlled the rackets. Pure power struggle.
And it got violent, extremely violent from what I understand. Can you walk us through some of the key events? It wasn't just threats, was it?
Not at all. The streets saw a lot of bloodshed. A major moment early on was the murder of Gaetano Reina in 1930. Masseria supposedly ordered it.
Trying to take out a rival within his own ranks.
Yeah, seems like it. But it backfired, really. Reina's people ended up siding with Maranzano, which has fueled the conflict. Then you had Giuseppe Morello and Joseph Pinzolo, both tied to Masseria, killed. The violence even spread outside New York. Joe Aiello, a Maranzano guy in Chicago, was murdered too. It was becoming clear this constant warfare, well, it wasn't sustainable.
Right. You can't run a business, even an illegal one, with that level of chaos constantly erupting. It sounds like someone saw a need for change.
Exactly. And the turning point really came from within Masseria's own faction.
What was that?
Luciano and Genovese. Despite being with Masseria, they started to think his leadership style was outdated, maybe holding them back. They saw the constant fighting as bad for business, essentially, so they made a deal.
With Maranzano.
Yes. They secretly reached out, agreed to betray Masseria if it meant ending the war. And that led directly to Masseria's end. April 15th, 1931. He was shot dead in a restaurant in Coney Island.
A pretty dramatic end. So Maranzano wins. He's the top dog now. Did that finally settle things down?
Well, Maranzano certainly thought so. He declared himself capo di tutti I capi.
Boss of all bosses.
Right. But, absolute power. It didn't sit well with everyone, especially not Luciano. Even though he helped put Maranzano there, Luciano saw him as too old school, too greedy. He felt Maranzano was just another version of the problem they wanted to solve.
So Luciano's ambition wasn't just about getting rid of Masseria. It was about changing the whole system.
Precisely. He had a different vision. More corporate, you could say. Designed for stability, less internal fighting, make the whole thing more resilient. So taking out one leader wouldn't cripple everything.
Okay, so Maranzano's reign wasn't destined to last long then.
Not at all. Just a few months later, September 1931, Maranzano himself was assassinated. And the order came from Luciano.
Wow. So Luciano clears the board. What did he put in place instead?
This is where the major restructuring happens. Luciano believed that one all-powerful boss was inherently unstable. It just invited challenges like the war they'd just fought. So he pushed for a different model.
And this is where the commission comes in. And the 5 families. That sounds like a huge shift.
It absolutely was. Luciano was the driving force behind creating the commission. Think of it as a governing body, a sort of board of directors for the Mafia. The idea was to give the major families, especially in New York, an equal, say, immediate disputes, prevent those all-out wars. And in New York, the structure was formalized into the 5 families, initially led by Luciano, Joe Bonanno, Joseph Profaci, Vincent Mangano, and Thomas Galliano.
Okay, so a council, the commission, overseeing these separate family units. How were the families themselves structured?
Pretty hierarchical. Each family had a boss at the top, then an underboss, the second in command, and a consigliere, an advisor, usually a trusted older member. Below them, you had caporesians or capos who ran crews of soldiers.
Soldiers being the actual members, the made men.
Exactly. The soldiers were the rank and file members, and they often used associates, people who worked with the family but weren't formally inducted. And generally, yeah, the higher positions, especially soldier and above, were reserved for men of Italian-American heritage who had been formally inducted or made.
Now, while all this restructuring is happening, another very dark organization starts to operate. Murder Incorporated. How does that piece fit in?
Oh, yes.
Murder.
Murder. They emerged sort of alongside this, maybe late 20s, but really became prominent as the enforcement arm of what was called the National Crime Syndicate. The syndicate itself was a big deal because it wasn't just Italian Americans. It was broader cooperation, mainly between Italian American mafia groups and Jewish mobsters. They saw the benefit in working together.
Dividing up territory and tasks almost.
Kind of, yeah. And Murder, Inc., active mainly from 29 to 41, was their muscle. Their hit squad, essentially. Figures like Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel were involved early on, building on their previous Bugs and Meyer mob. Later, Louis Lepka Buchhalter and, significantly, Albert Anastasia became key leaders.
Anastasia, one of Masseria's guys originally, then part of Luciano's structure. Interesting overlap. And Murder, Inc. wasn't just one ethnic group either.
No, that's key. It was multi-ethnic. Primarily Jewish and Italian-American gangsters, often recruited from, the tougher neighborhoods in Brooklyn and the Lower East Side. Their sole purpose, really, was contract killing, taking out people for mob bosses anywhere in the country.
A terrifyingly specialized role. Did they have, like, a headquarters and any idea of the scale of their work?
Their unofficial HQ was famously a back room at Rosie Gold's candy store in Brooklyn. Midnight Roses, they called it sometimes. As for scale, estimates are difficult, naturally, but it's believed they carried out somewhere between, say, 400 and maybe up to 1,000 murders.
Good grief, that's staggering.
It is. And some individuals became notorious killers, like Harry Pittsburgh, Phil Strauss. They had a structure for payment to retainers, fees per job, even benefits for the families of the hitmen. Some early hits included people like Abe Wagner, and they were ruthless about eliminating potential informants for Lepke Buchalter, like George Rudnick.
A truly dark operation. Highly organized, incredibly violent. How did it finally fall apart? How did law enforcement even get a handle on something like that?
The break came around 1940. A member named Abe Relis, known as Kid Twist, got arrested and decided to talk. To save himself, basically.
He flipped?
He flipped, and he knew everything. His testimony opened the floodgates. Other members started cooperating, too. Harry Rudolph, Albert Tannenbaum, Seymour Magoon, quite a few others. Their information led to a wave of trials and convictions. Big names within Murder, Inc. went down. Harry Mione, Frank Abondando, Strauss, Martin Goldstein, Lipke Buchhalter himself, Emmanuel Weiss, Lee Capone.
What happened to Relis, the guy who started it all?
Well, that's still debated. He died falling from a hotel window while under police protection. Officially an accident or suicide attempt, but the suspicion has always been he was silenced. The canary who could sing but couldn't fly, they said.
And this whole prosecution, it was a big deal for Thomas E. Dewey's career, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Prosecuting Murder, Inc. was a major stepping stone for Dewey. Helped build his reputation as a racket buster before he became governor of New York.
It's fascinating how these threads connect. The war leads to the commission, which needs enforcement, leading to Murder, Inc., and then its downfall exposes the whole network.
Exactly. The Castellammares War created the conditions, the need for a more stable structure like the Commission and the Five Families. Murder, Inc. then became the tool that Syndicate used to maintain order and eliminate rivals, showing how these different groups, Italian-American, Jewish, could cooperate for mutual benefit, however grim. And when Murder, Inc. collapsed, it gave law enforcement and the public this unprecedented look inside the machine. It really hurt their ability to operate in the shadows.
And figures like Luciano, Genovese, Anastasia, they had hands in both the restructuring and the enforcement side. Shows how centralized the control still was, in a way.
Right. The leadership overlapped. They were involved in setting up the new structure and directing its enforcement arm.
So this whole period, it's really a story of transformation. From chaotic gang warfare to a more bureaucratized national crime network with specialized units.
Yeah.
And then the exposure of one of those units providing a window into that world.
Precisely. The shift from that internal warfare of the early 30s to the Commission's structure and the role played by Murder, Inc. fundamentally altered American organized crime. The legacy of those events, the structures created, the methods used, they shaped things for decades afterward.
It really makes you think, seeing how these organizations adapted back then, restructuring after internal wars, creating specialized branches like Murder, Inc., dealing with exposure. it prompts the question, doesn't it? How might similar clandestine groups be evolving today to meet entirely different pressures, different technologies, different forms of law enforcement? It underscores this constant dynamic of adaptation within that hidden world.